If you do anything wrong in your life, and I find out about it, I'm going to try to take everything away from you.
Something happened to Katt Williams after that Club Shay Shay interview. Something that the headlines won't tell you about. And the man who understands it better than anyone, the man who's been quietly warning us for years, is Dave Chappelle. Now, before you write this off as just another conspiracy video, I need you to stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't theory. It's a pattern. A pattern that Dave Chappelle has been pointing at for over 2 decades. Through his jokes, through his silence, through walking away from $50 million. And when you lay that pattern right next to what's happening to Katt Williams right now, something shifts. Something becomes very hard to unsee. So here's the question I need you to sit with from the very beginning. Why do the comedians who tell the most truth end up being called the most crazy? We're going to find out. Setting the stage, the Club Shay Shay moment. Let's go back to the moment it all changed. Katt Williams sat down with Shannon Sharpe on Club Shay Shay, looked straight into that camera, and did something that almost nobody at his level has ever done. He didn't hint, he didn't imply, he didn't wrap it in a metaphor or bury it inside a punchline. He accused, directly, by name, Steve Harvey, Kevin Hart, Diddy, Tyler Perry, Ludacris. He said, and I want you to hear this clearly, they pay you to not talk about certain things. He said he was canceled specifically for speaking on Michael Jackson and R. Kelly. He called out the entire machinery of how Hollywood controls its talent. And then he said something that cuts to the bone. The business of entertainment is the business of pretend. And if people make their living making fiction seem real, why would you be surprised when they turn that same skill on you? Think about that for a moment. A man sitting in a nationally broadcast interview on camera, telling you how the illusionists use their craft against people who step out of line. That's not bitterness talking. That's a blueprint. And then look at what happened right after. The industry went into overdrive. Headlines called him jealous, bitter, unhinged. Every old arrest, every canceled show, every rumor from 15 years ago got dragged back to the surface. Shannon Sharpe had to get back on camera just to explain why he even let the conversation go that long. Comedians who had been quiet for years suddenly rushed to social media to defend their reputations. PR teams mobilized. The machine cranked into gear. But Katt, the man who just set Hollywood on fire, he stepped back. He didn't flood the podcasts. He didn't start a daily live stream. He didn't go on a victory tour capitalizing on the viral moment. He went quiet. And that's when the whispers started. That's when people started saying, something feels different about the new Katt. And here's where Dave Chappelle enters the story. Because if you want to understand what might be happening to Katt Williams right now, you have to understand what happened to Dave first. Dave Chappelle, the man who saw it coming. Before Katt ever sat in that Club Shay Shay chair, Dave Chappelle was already describing the same world. He was on stage, in a set most people laughed at and moved on from, when he said something that deserves a much closer listen. He said he watches other comedians deliver very real truths, but they hide them inside jokes so well that the audience doesn't even realize what they just heard. He said the country is getting tight, that people better let some air out of the ball before things explode. Now ask yourself this, why is a comedian talking about pressure needing to be released? Why does a man at the height of his career, with the #1 show on television, a massive contract, the world at his feet, why does he sound like someone who's watching a clock run down? Because he knows something, and he has been trying to tell us for years. Dave was one of the first voices to publicly say what so many quietly knew, that every black man in Hollywood gets put in a dress at some point in his career, and that it is not an accident. He wasn't talking about a costume choice, he was talking about a test, a moment where the industry watches what you're made of. Do you comply? Do you laugh it off and go along? Or do you draw a line? And Dave, back when he was still the golden child of Comedy Central, back when walking away from his deal would have seemed insane to anyone watching from the outside, Dave drew a line. He tells the story himself. He's on set, making a movie with Martin Lawrence. He walks into his trailer and there's a dress. A writer comes in and pitches this hilarious scene. Martin's sneaking out of jail, disguises you as a woman, you put this dress on. And Dave says no, he's not comfortable with it. He says it should have been discussed. The writer tells him all the greats have done it.
And I would never play an arena before I saw you do it. You made me dream bigger, and you're younger than me.
Dave fires back. If all the greats have done it, then it's hacky. The pressure keeps coming. The director shows up, then the producers. Then the whole machine leans in. And Dave holds the line. He doesn't wear the dress. And then, 10 minutes later, they come back with a completely new scene. Just like that. All that pressure, all that urgency, all those "we'll lose so much money every minute" arguments. Gone. Like it never happened. As Dave himself put it, "You gotta take a stand." That's not a comedian being difficult. That's a man who just figured out exactly how the game is played. The dress is not just a dress. Now I know some of you are thinking, isn't this making too much out of a costume? It's just comedy. It's just entertainment. So let's look at what the people who were actually there are saying. T.K. Kirkland, someone who was deep in those circles long before any of this became a public conversation, comes out and confirms it. He says it's true. Katt Williams told a story about turning down Big Mama's house too specifically because Martin tried to put him in a dress. TK doesn't deny it. He contextualizes it. He explains that back in the day, with Flip Wilson wearing a dress every Thursday night on primetime television, people didn't read into it the way they do today. He says the world has changed. Awareness has shifted, and what was once brushed off is now being examined under a very different light. But then there's a younger comedian named Brandon, and Brandon's story is the one that should send a chill down your spine. Katt Williams pulled him aside personally. He told Brandon, "Do not wear the dress, not for the money, not for the shine, not for the opportunity. Just don't do it." Brandon didn't listen. And after he put the dress on for a roll-in lottery ticket, he says everything in his career changed, not upward. He says it felt like a curse. He says everything had been going right, and then everything went wrong, and the timing lines up exactly with that moment. And he points out something even more haunting. He thinks the scene caught the attention of people in power because he came across too real, too authentic, and that's when the pressure started. That's when, in his own words, it was like they looked at him and said, "He might be a kid, just put him in a dress." He looks back now and understands what Katt was trying to do. He says Katt wasn't heckling him from the media. Katt was trying to warn him. So now we have Dave Chappelle saying it, T.K. Kirkland confirming it, Brandon living it firsthand, and Katt Williams losing industry opportunities because he refused it years before any of this went public. How many data points does a pattern need before it stops being a coincidence? The Africa moment and what really happened to Dave. Here's where the story takes a turn that most people have forgotten about, or maybe been encouraged to forget. Dave Chappelle had everything. The #1 show on cable television, a $50 million contract renewal sitting on the table, a cultural moment that belonged entirely to him. And he walked away from all of it and flew to Africa. Now, the story the media told was very simple. Dave Chappelle lost his mind. That became the headline, the shorthand, the accepted version of events. Crazy. Cracked under pressure, couldn't handle the fame, burned out. But listen to how Dave describes it himself. He says he went to Africa to chill, to think, to breathe. He says he was on the beach when he started hearing reports that he was in a mental institution in South Africa. He says he must have been losing his mind because he thought it was the beach. The disconnect between what he was experiencing and what was being reported about him wasn't just strange, it was telling. And then he says something that deserves to be heard loud and clearly, something that most people gloss right over. "Maybe I know stuff that people don't want me to talk about, so they call me crazy." Read that again. Sit with it, because that's not the statement of a man who cracked. That's the statement of a man who understood exactly what was happening to him and why. But here's what the media doesn't want to be the main story. He came back. He came back, and despite having walked away from the biggest deal in comedy history, despite having been publicly labeled unstable, despite being written off by an industry that was certain it had seen the last of him, he rebuilt, methodically, patiently, on his own terms. He got 7 Netflix specials. He won Grammy Awards. He performed sold-out arena shows across the country. He became arguably the most respected stand-up comedian alive, the benchmark by which everyone else in the art form is now measured. So how does a man who lost his mind, come back to become the gold standard of his entire art form. How does someone who supposedly cracked under pressure go on to perform for tens of thousands of people a night, commanding the room like few comedians ever have? Unless losing his mind was never really the story. Jim Breuer, someone who was working inside the Hollywood machine during this period, someone who saw the gears turning up close, describes what he witnessed. He talks about Hollywood like a mafia, not metaphorically, literally. He says he watched scandals get buried in real time, watched the machinery activate with a kind of cold efficiency that you don't forget once you've seen it. He describes the mechanism. Someone in the industry steps out of line, says the wrong thing, gets too comfortable with the truth, and suddenly the fixers appear, the lawyers, the money, the carefully worded agreements, the quiet phone calls, and then, ping, the story disappears. It never happened. Nobody talks about it again. The person either falls in line or falls off entirely. And Jim says there were 2 or 3 huge names he personally watched this happen to. Household names. And it scared him to death. Not shook him, not unsettled him. Scared him to death. That's a specific kind of fear. The kind that comes from realizing the system you're operating inside has no loyalty, no conscience, and no limits. Now place that right next to what happened to Dave. Not crazy, not unstable, not a breakdown. A man who got too real, got too close to the truth, and chose to remove himself from the equation before the equation removed him. A man who looked at what was coming and made a calculated decision that Africa was safer than staying. And then he came back different, quieter about certain things, more deliberate, more careful about certain things, still pointing at the beast, still naming it, but learning to do it from a safer distance, learning to wrap the message in enough comedy that it could survive, still calling the industry a monster, his exact words, on stage, on camera, in front of thousands of people. This industry is a monster, still saying his show was stolen from him, still saying that if you're streaming it, you're fencing stolen goods. He never stopped telling the truth. He just got smarter about how he told it, but knowing exactly how far he can push before the pushback becomes something he can't survive. That's not cowardice. That's wisdom earned the hard way. Jim Breuer, TK, Brandon, and the full picture. Let's bring all the voices together now, because this is where the weight of it all becomes impossible to dismiss. When you lay these accounts side by side, the pattern doesn't just suggest something, it screams it. You have Dave Chappelle, a man who was the golden child of the industry, who refused the dress, who walked away from $50 million, who got called crazy for doing it, and who came back coded and careful, still telling the truth, but wrapped in just enough performance to stay alive in the game.
Whoa, hold on, lady, I didn't say all that. You know, with these tapes, they can do a lot of things.
A man whose entire second act is a masterclass in saying everything, while giving them just enough deniability to leave him alone. You have TK Kirkland, a veteran who was in those rooms, who confirms the dress pressure was real and documented, who says it's been going on long before Katt became famous, and who traces it back through decades of entertainment history. A man who watched this pattern repeat itself across generations and still can't fully explain why so few people talk about it openly. You have Brandon, a young comedian who ignored the warning, who thought it was exaggerated or mythologized, felt the consequences personally and professionally, and now says, you couldn't pay him $1 trillion to put on that dress. Not $1 million. Not 50 million. $1 trillion. That's a specific number from a man who wants you to understand he's not being rhetorical. Have Jim Breuer, a man who watched Hollywood's mafia machinery bury scandals and protect favorites in real time, who says the whole experience scared him to death, and who hints at a post-Africa Dave Chappelle that doesn't fully match the pre-Africa Dave he used to know, like something shifted in him, like whatever he saw or experienced over there, or whatever he understood about what was happening back home, changed him permanently. And then you have Katt Williams, the man who took everything these four were hinting at, saying in code, dancing around carefully, or refusing to say at all, and put it directly on the table in one of the most startling interviews in recent memory. Named the names, described the mechanism in surgical detail, talked about pre-planned downfalls engineered years in advance, talked about careers being built and destroyed by the same small group of people, talked about rooms you don't get into unless you've already proven you'll keep your mouth shut and play the game exactly as it's designed, and then went quiet. Not loud, not combative, not on a press run, quiet. Here is the question I want you to really sit with, the one that should keep you up at night. Is the silence of a man who just told the world's biggest secret comforting? Does it feel like relief? Like maybe it wasn't as serious as it sounded? Like maybe the world just moved on normally the way it does? Or does it feel like the opposite? Dave's warning is embedded in plain sight. What makes Dave Chappelle so fascinating is that he never stopped warning us. He just learned to do it in a language the machine couldn't easily punish him for. Watch his stand-up from the last several years with fresh eyes. He talks about how truth gets used as a weapon. He talks about how media and administrations play with tragedy and outrage. He does a full bit about how, if you see certain people in your industry doing something persistently wrong, you call them out. And he's not talking about comedy technique. He says he will fight anyone who gets in the way of a true practitioner of this art form because the truth is being obstructed. He talks about being a lion, so he can be the lamb he really is. He says he talks loud and forceful, so that when the moment comes, he can just be himself without someone trying to take that from him. Listen to that. He says he performs toughness as a defense mechanism for his real self. That is not a comedian describing a comedy technique. That is a man telling you he has learned exactly how survival works in this industry. He even jokes about being a conspiracy theorist. He says he connects dots that maybe shouldn't be connected.
It's wild because I even have insight into how the white community must have felt.
And then he describes the dress incident in full. The trailer, the writer, the pressure campaign, the producers, all of it. And ends it not with anger, but with hard-won clarity. You got to take a stand. That's the warning. Not delivered as a press release or a podcast rant. Delivered as a joke, hidden in plain sight, meant for the people paying close enough attention to see it. And then there's his political commentary, which at first glance looks like a comedian navigating a cultural moment. But listen beneath the surface. He talks about rhetoric being weaponized. He says the country needs mending. He says we've gone very far in the wrong direction, and the leadership doesn't have the cultural astuteness to lead the charge on healing it. He talks about being in a time where you have to listen more than you've ever had to listen. That's not standard late-night comedian material. That's a man who has been burned and rebuilt, who understands exactly what speaking too loudly costs you, choosing very deliberately what he says and how he says it. Every word is measured. Every concession is strategic. Compare that to Katt, who measured nothing in that interview, who gave it all at full volume, with names and dates attached, and who then stepped back into the shadows like someone who knew exactly what typically comes next. The pattern that explains the new Katt. Here is what I believe is actually happening, and I want you to tell me in the comments if you see it differently, because this conversation matters. There is a pattern that plays out in Hollywood every time someone at a certain level decides to stop playing by the unwritten rules. Step 1. The opportunity. You get offered access, money, the chance to play at the highest level. All you have to do is pass the test, whatever form that test takes. Step 2. The compliance check. Doesn't matter what the specific ask is. What matters is whether you do it without being told twice. Step 3. The choice. Some people take it and move up. Some people refuse and find out what happens to people who refuse. Step 4. The aftermath. If you refused and you're loud about why you refused, the machine doesn't need to destroy you all at once. It just needs to make you look unstable, unhinged, unreliable, bitter. It needs to make it so that when you tell the truth, the audience's first instinct is to question your mental state rather than the content of what you're saying. Dave Chappelle got step 4, the crazy label, the he couldn't handle the fame narrative. It was applied to him carefully and consistently until it stuck. And now, watch what they're doing to Katt Williams. Every old arrest is being recirculated. Every missed show, every canceled appearance, every story from his past that makes him look unstable.
Right?
The same playbook, being run on the same field, against a different man who made the same choice to tell the truth. But here's the difference between Dave's situation and Katt's situation. And this is the part that makes the new Katt so unsettling to watch. He found a way to survive inside the machine he once rejected. He still calls it a monster, but he's learned to coexist with the monster. He hints, he alludes. He gives the apology that's just enough to keep the door open without fully surrendering his dignity. He is, by his own description, a lion performing calm. Katt walked in, threw the whole manual on the table, and went quiet. He's not adjusting. He's not recalibrating. He doesn't appear to be looking for a way to stay inside the system he just exposed. He looks like a man who delivered his message and is now watching the room very carefully, knowing that the room's next move is not in his hands. And that is what's making people uneasy. Not just that he looks different or sounds different, it's that he looks like a man who made a calculated, deliberate choice, knowing full well what that choice costs, and chose it anyway. Why this conversation is bigger than comedy? I need to say something directly before we close, because I think this gets lost in the back and forth about celebrity beef and industry drama. What Dave Chappelle, Katt Williams, TK Kirkland, Brandon and Jim Breuer are all describing, in different ways, at different volumes, with different levels of courage, is a system that commodifies human beings and punishes authenticity. They are describing an industry that has perfected the art of controlling narrative, burying truth, protecting the compliant, and dismantling the resistant. This pattern exists in politics, in media, in corporate structures everywhere. The specific tests and rituals may vary, but the underlying mechanism, compliance rewarded, resistance punished, truth dismissed as instability.
I couldn't pick my own penis out of a lineup, all right? And me and my penis.
That mechanism is universal, and comedy, of all the art forms, is supposed to be the place where truth gets through. It's supposed to be the Trojan horse, the punchline that makes you laugh and then realize 3 seconds later that you just heard something real. Dave Chappelle built his entire legacy on that principle. He said it himself. He will fight anyone who obstructs a true practitioner of the art form because the art form is about truth, and truth is being obstructed. Katt Williams took it a step further. He decided that truth in this particular moment didn't need a punchline to hide behind. He just said it. And now we get to watch what happens next. The final question. So here's where I need to leave you, because I think you deserve to sit with this and come to your own conclusions. Dave Chappelle went through the machine and came out the other side more careful, more coded, more controlled, but still standing, still working, still pointing at the beast with enough plausible deniability to keep the lights on. If the machine could do that to Dave Chappelle, the most celebrated comedian of his generation, a man with cultural armor that most people will never have, what do you think it's capable of doing to Katt Williams? And when you look at the Katt Williams we're seeing today, quieter, darker, almost resigned, are you watching a man who is simply evolving? Or are you watching a man who has already paid a price that the public hasn't been allowed to see clearly yet? Dave Chappelle warned us. He warned us through jokes. He warned us through silence. He warned us by walking away from $50 million and going to Africa. He warned us when he came back and called the industry a monster. He warned us every time he described a dress in a trailer and the machinery that came along with it. TK Kirkland confirmed it. Brandon lived it. Jim Breuer documented the mafia mechanics underneath all of it, and Katt Williams looked into the camera on Club Shay Shay and described the whole system, the pre-planned downfalls, the protected favorites, the invisible hands, with names and faces attached. The question isn't whether this system exists. Too many people, from too many different positions, with too little incentive to coordinate a lie, have said too many overlapping things for this to be coincidence. The question is, now that you can see the pattern, what are you going to do with what you know? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from you. Do you think Katt Williams is going to come back stronger? Do you think the silence is strategic? Or do you think what we're watching right now is step 4 of a playbook that's been running longer than any of us have been paying attention? Share this video, not because the algorithm needs it, but because this conversation needs more people in it. And until next time, keep your eyes open and your ears sharp, because the truth is always in there, Sometimes it's just dressed up as a joke.